Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. The comms channel crackled. Final orbit sequence complete. We are clear of Geryon 4. Prepare for FTL jump to Tarsus Station in 5 minutes. Captain Kimmy Mauser's voice was steady, firm, a presence that turned orders into certainty. His battle-tested flagship, the Griffin, led the human convoy into the deep black. On the bridge, a hum filled the air, the controlled rhythm of a crew in motion. Lieutenant Freya Kezia, poised at comms, relayed coordinates with precision. Ensign Eamon Beatty kept his eyes locked on nav systems, monitoring orbital drift. Everything was routine. Routine bred comfort. Then, everything shattered. "Captain," Martin Kanan, tactical officer, barked across the bridge. "Unidentified energy signatures. Close range." Mauser's brow furrowed. "How close?" Kanan worked the controls fast, his voice tightening. "Too close." The deck trembled as the sensors flared red. Then came the real warning. Gravitational disturbance. Multiple FTL discharges inbound. Before Mauser could issue a command, space itself twisted. The sensor grid flared white-hot, the ship's hull shuddering as a distortion wave ripped through the sector. This wasn't a standard jump. It was something else, something wrong. And then, they came through. A swarm of small ships tore into real space, erupting from the ether in violent, uncontrolled bursts. Some spun out of control, caught in gravitational turbulence. Others flickered with failing power, engines sputtering like the last gasps of dying stars. The closest one barely stabilized before detonating in a violent blast, its hull fragmenting into burning debris. Others followed, spilling into real space in a chaotic frenzy, some tumbling uncontrollably, others maneuvering with sheer desperation. Mauser's stomach knotted. This wasn't an attack. It was a desperate flight. "Holy shit," Kezia whispered, eyes wide as she watched the viewports fill with the mayhem. More ships burst into existence, their engines flaring with wild intensity. 3-person scout craft, civilian transport pods, shuttles too small to be military. They weaved through space at reckless speed, darting through the void like prey in flight. Some exploded the moment they emerged, others collided with each other in sheer panic. "Where the hell did they come from?" Mauser muttered. Then the hunters arrived. The second wave came like a blade, slicing into the void where the first fleet had barely escaped. Dark, angular ships burst out of FTL, emerging with far more control than their prey. Sleek, elongated hulls curved into vicious claw-like formations, their engines glowing with a cold, predatory blue. They wasted no time. The first of the new arrivals fired before it even fully exited the jump. A pulse of red energy lashed forward, punching clean through a fleeing shuttle, sending jagged metal and bodies spiraling into the void. Another fighter banked sharply, its cannons locking onto a second target. This time, the explosion reached multiple ships in a chain reaction, lighting up the darkness like a field of dying stars. Another fighter banked hard and ripped through a disabled vessel with its forward-mounted cannons, shattering it in seconds. Kanan exhaled sharply, staring at his readings. "They're hunting them." Mauser said nothing, watching as the pursuers tore through their prey with merciless efficiency. And then one of them turned. The lead fighter stalled mid-pursuit, veering sharply, almost too sharply. The rest of its squadron followed, shifting their formation in a fluid, instinctual movement. They spotted the human fleet. For a second, the bridge was dead silent. Then, a flashing alert filled the main display, distress calls flooding in. Kezia's console erupted with overlapping signals, static-filled but urgent, alien voices barking in desperation and fear. A dozen different emergency beacons pinged the Griffin, each carrying a single unified message: help. Mauser shook his head sharply, forcing clarity. Not now. There was no time to untangle the signals. He knew what was coming. "Kezia, open a channel to Tarsus Station. Priority signal." She moved quickly, overriding the interference to force the message through. "Tarsus Station. This is Captain Kimmy Mouser of the Griffin. We've encountered an unknown conflict in deep space, multiple civilian vessels under fire. We're moving to engage, but we need intel. Any known hostilities in this sector? A beat of silence. No response. Kezia glanced at him, concern flashing in her eyes. No confirmation, Captain. I'm not getting anything back. Mouser's grip tightened around his armrest. No time to wait. The incoming fighters were already accelerating toward them. Fuck, Mouser exhaled. His mind moved faster than his body, decisions cascading in milliseconds. Then, louder. Raise shields. Get those damn cargo ships in formation. Now. The bridge burst into action. Beatty fired off rapid orders throughout the fleet, his hands racing over the controls. Cargo ships confirm shields up, defensive formation shifting. The attackers were coming fast. Hostiles incoming! Kanan shouted, scanning the targeting systems. Weapons live! They're already firing! The first energy bolt slammed into the Griffin's shields, sending violent arcs of blue static rippling along the hull. The ship lurched, internal alarms shrieking as power surged through the conduits. Mouser gritted his teeth as a secondary explosion rocked the lower decks. Damage reports scrolled across the display, crew members shouting over the comms as systems struggled to compensate. We don't know why they're attacking us, Mouser growled. His fingers curled into a fist against the command console as he watched the enemy close in. They'll learn soon enough. None of them are making it back. The first barrage struck hard. Energy bolts lashed against the Griffin's shields, sending waves of blue light flickering over the ship's hull. The impact shook the bridge, making Freya Kezia grip the edge of her console to steady herself. Red warning indicators lit up, scrolling across the tactical displays as proximity alarms howled. Shields holding barely! Kanan barked, eyes darting over the data. They're putting everything they've got on the cargo ships. Mouser's hands clenched. That was the strategy. The attacking fleet wasn't targeting their combat vessels directly. Instead, they were hitting the most vulnerable ships first, trying to force the humans to scatter, to break formation, to become prey. Not happening. Amen. Get us between them. The Griffin's thrusters ignited as Ensign Beatty slammed the control thrusters forward. The ship's massive frame twisted, its reinforced plating absorbing another barrage as it pushed forward, shielding the lead cargo ship from the worst of the assault. Watch your positioning, Kanan called. If they break through to the cargo ships, we'll be picking up bodies instead of cargo. Mouser knew it. The cargo vessels weren't built for combat. They were slow, heavy, and fragile, their only defense being the energy shielding already flickering under the relentless barrage. If the attackers managed to break the shields entirely, it would be over in seconds. Kezia, fleet-wide channel now! She keyed in the command, stabilizing the open link. Connected! Mouser reacted instantly. All wings, break their formation. Beatty, bring us hard to starboard. We're cutting through their attack line. The fleet responded instantly. The human fighters peeled away, executing precise, high-speed maneuvers that forced the enemy to shift focus. They were baiting them, pulling them into deceptive pursuit routes. The hostile ships adjusted course, their targeting systems recalibrating in real time, but that half-second of hesitation was enough. Now! Mouser snapped. The Griffin's forward batteries lit up, sending precision railgun bursts directly into the center of the enemy squadron. 2 ships exploded instantly, their hulls erupting in silent fireballs. The others veered hard, trying to break free, but Kanan was already ahead of them. Gotcha, he barked, working the targeting controls with rapid efficiency. A concentrated burst ripped through the lead attack craft, its frame disintegrating as the chain reaction engulfed 2 more behind it. Even with those kills, they weren't winning yet. More inbound, Kezia called. 7, no, 9 hostiles still engaging. Mouser's mind moved faster than the combat itself. They were adapting, but it wasn't enough. They're still targeting the cargo ships, sir, Beatty warned. Mouser's gut twisted. He glanced at the shield's power readouts. They were failing. The cargo vessels wouldn't last another full attack wave. They needed to turn the battlefield in their favor. Kanan, find me a weak point. The tactical officer's eyes flicked through the sensor feeds. hunting for patterns, inefficiencies, vulnerabilities. His eyes narrowed. They're prioritizing the cargo ships, trying to keep us on the defensive. If we don't break their momentum, they'll overwhelm us. Mouser shouted the order. Relay that to all units. We turn this fight now. The human fighters adjusted immediately, breaking away from their original positions to create a deceptive pursuit line. They looped outward, drawing fire away from the cargo ships, forcing the enemy to scatter and break formation. The enemy took the bait. They surged after the human ships, accelerating too aggressively, and then the maneuver snapped shut. The Griffin's broadside cannons erupted with focused fire. Heavy caliber rounds ripped through their flanks, tearing into the ships just as they struggled to correct their vectors. One ship overcompensated and clipped a piece of debris from the earlier battle. It spun wildly before disintegrating against a railgun burst. Another fired blindly while trying to escape, hitting its own ally in the chaos. 4 down, Kanan reported, adrenaline lacing his voice. We're turning this fight. But they weren't done yet. 2 on the starboard side, Beatty started, but Mouser was already on it. I see it. All units, redirect fire. The remaining enemy fighters had shifted to attack from the flanks, hoping to catch the Griffin off guard while it was mid-strike. They almost succeeded. But Kasia's warning came just in time. Incoming! The Griffin rolled mid-burn, dodging a kill shot by meters. The ship's defense turrets activated simultaneously, throwing a deadly web of suppression fire into the attacker's path. One ship evaded, banking hard, but the other wasn't so lucky. A direct hit ripped its hull in half. The last ship abandoned the fight. It veered off course, turning its thrusters to full burn, retreating. They're running, Kasia confirmed, voice tight. Mouser stared at the sensor readings, watching the lone survivor disappear into the void. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a warning. Beatty, jump coordinates, now. The navigation officer had already prepped the sequence. Locked in. Ready to go, sir. Mouser nodded. All ships, jump, now. The command was executed instantly. The human fleet vanished into FTL, leaving only burning wreckage behind. Tarsis Station hung in the black like a silent sentinel, its massive docking arrays extending from a reinforced core. It wasn't a fortress. It was a supply and observation station, lightly armed and never meant to be the front line of any conflict. Then, the Griffin snapped back into real space, her engines humming as the human fleet emerged near the station. The once chaotic battlefield was now distant wreckage, scattered debris from the desperate skirmish left behind. Captain Kimmy Mouser leaned forward, eyes fixed on the looming structure ahead. Griffin, this is Tarsis Station. Captain Mouser, you are cleared to dock. A voice crackled over the comms. Admiral Dangar is waiting for you. Mouser exhaled, finally allowing the smallest fraction of tension to release from his chest. He pushed himself up from his seat. Kanan, you're with me. His gaze flicked to Ensign Eamon Beatty. Check the Griffin's systems. I want a full analysis, engines, shields, weapons. If anything needs fixing, make it a priority. We need her running at full capacity. Beatty gave a sharp nod. Understood, sir. I'll have a report ready before you're back. Mouser stepped off the bridge, his boots echoing against the steel plating of the deck as he made his way to the docking bay. The doors to Tarsis's command deck slid apart with a pressurized hiss, revealing Admiral Sean Dangar at the central holotable, his squared shoulders rigid, every movement deliberate. His silver-streaked hair spoke of battles survived, but his eyes, however, held frustration. Mouser, Dangar said, stepping forward. Good to see you in one piece. Mouser gave a curt nod. Would have been easier if you'd answered when I called. Dangar's gaze sharpened. I got your message, but when I tried to respond, you weren't there. Mouser's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Dangar tapped a sequence into the holotable. A grainy recording appeared, a transmission log showing repeated attempts to connect with the Griffin's fleet, each one met with silence. You were gone, Dangar said flatly, as if your fleet had never been there at all. Mouser exchanged a glance with Martin Kanan, who stood rigid beside him. Some kind of interference, maybe, Kanan muttered. Dangar's lips pressed into a thin line. More than that. It's like your fleet wasn't there at all. That doesn't seem like a malfunction. Kanan frowned. Strange. We were still communicating fine on our end. Mouser's fingers drummed against the holotable, blocking. That changed things. Tell me what the hell we just fought, he said, forcing himself to keep his tone even. Dangar turned to the interface, pulling up fresh data. According to our records, the ships that attacked you belonged to the Vorak. Mouser's posture stiffened. He had heard the name before. Predatory, nomadic, but never outright hostile. And the ships that were fleeing? Kanan asked. Dangar pulled up another image. The desperate civilian crafts they had seen fleeing through FTL, breaking apart under fire. Zainari, he said simply. Mouser's expression darkened. That doesn't track. There's no conflict between them. Not officially, Dangar agreed. But those Vorak fighters were hunting them like it was personal. And if that wasn't bad enough... The doors hissed open again. A breathless Freya Kasia strode in, a datapad clenched tightly in her hands. Captain, she panted, we finished decoding the distress calls. Mouser turned fully to her. Tell me. She handed him the pad, but her expression said it all. The Zinari weren't just fleeing, she said. They were ambushed. Their transmission details a calculated attack. Their entire recon fleet was wiped out in seconds. Mouser's fingers tightened around the datapad as he scanned the fragmented messages. Frantic voices, begging for help, reporting the sudden onslaught. We tried to send signals to other Zinari fleets, Kasia continued. No response. Either they're not getting through, or there's no one left to answer. A tense silence filled the air. Mouser felt the shift in the room, the weight of it. Dangar's voice was measured. This was an extermination. Then, the station's emergency klaxons erupted. Kasia flinched, instinctively glancing at her communicator. Her face paled. Sensors just lit up, multiple inbound contacts, same energy signatures. Mouser's eyes snapped to the nearest tactical display. Red markers bloomed across the screen, swarming toward the station. Vorak? Kanan demanded. Kasia's voice was clipped. They found us. Mouser's blood ran cold. Time to contact? 7 minutes. How the fuck did they track us? Kanan snapped. The same question hung in every officer's mind, but there was no time for that now. Mouser turned sharply, already moving. Kanan, on me! Kasia, get the fleet ready. We hold this station. He barely heard the responses as he stormed from the room. There was no more doubt. They weren't hunting humans before, but now they are. The red alert klaxons blared through Tarsus Station, shaking the air with an urgency that left no room for doubt. The enemy was coming, and fast. Mouser tapped his communicator. Kanan, with me. All combat personnel, to your ships now. We have incoming hostiles. We're launching immediately. Freya Kasia worked the comms, ensuring fleet-wide coordination, while Admiral Sean Dangar continued barking orders to reinforce internal defenses. Get those turrets operational, Dangar ordered. All non-essential crew, secure your stations. Mouser was already moving toward the exit. Kanan followed at his side. They'll be on us in minutes, sir, Kanan warned. Then we make those minutes count, Mouser shot back, as they sprinted down the corridor toward the hangar. The Tarsus hangar was already in motion, flight crews scrambling to prep fighters as alarms echoed off the steel bulkheads. Pilots climbed into cockpits, mechanics rushed final checks, and the hum of engines coming to life filled the space. Mouser climbed into the Griffin, Kanan right behind him. All wings, launch now. The Griffin's engines ignited, tearing out of the hangar in a burst of blue thrusters. Behind them, the human fleet followed, ship after ship erupting into the void as the defense force took formation. Kanan status. Vorak ships inbound, fast and aggressive. Kanan called from his station. They're diving straight for us. The Vorak fleet emerged from FTL with terrifying force, their ships tearing into real space in flawless sync. Mauser's grip tightened on the command console as his display flashed with dozens of enemy markers. "Fire at will!" Mauser ordered. The Griffin's broadside cannons roared to life, sending a hailstorm of kinetic rounds into the void. Other human ships followed suit, their weapons lashing out in coordinated bursts of light and destruction. The first Vorak wave hit like a meteor storm. Plasma streaked through the darkness, slamming into human ships before pilots could react. One fighter exploded in a bright, silent detonation, debris scattering across the void. Another screamed over the comms, "I'm hit! I'm hit!" before spiraling helplessly into Tarsus Station's outer ring. Mauser barely had time to process the loss before another explosion rocked the fleet, snuffing out 2 more call signs from his display. The comms crackled with frantic voices. "We're losing ground. They're everywhere," as the enemy weaved effortlessly through their defenses, turning the battlefield into a slaughter. "They're too damn quick," Kanan growled, his targeting reticle struggling to lock onto the darting ships. Then, the first explosion. A Vorak fighter clipped too close to a turret burst, its shields overloading before detonating into a cloud of shrapnel. "Got one," a pilot shouted over the comms. "Don't celebrate yet," Mauser barked. "They're still coming." A second wave broke through, streaking toward Tarsus Station like a hail of plasma-laced arrows. The station's defenses opened up. Turrets spat streams of firepower, automated gun batteries tracking the enemy with ruthless accuracy. But the Vorak were adaptive, and even as they took losses, they adjusted their approach. One fighter slipped past the defensive net, diving toward the station's exposed docking ring. "We've got a breach," a voice called over the comms. "They're trying to cut through the outer hull," Mauser cursed under his breath. "We need to push them back. Now!" Kanan's voice snapped through the comms. "I think I see it. They're fast, but they can't make tight turns under heavy acceleration." Mauser's instincts kicked in instantly. "Relay that to the fleet. Cut off their escape angles. Force them into tight corrections. Make them trip over themselves." The human fighters adjusted immediately, their maneuvers shifting to funnel the Vorak into more predictable movement patterns. Suddenly the tide shifted. Caught in the trap, the Vorak faltered, but only for a moment. The first ships fell, yes, but the hunters adapted fast. The survivors began to regroup, adjusting their trajectories to minimize exposure. A Vorak frigate tore through space, locking onto the Griffin with pinpoint accuracy. Its barrage struck hard, overwhelming the shields for a split second. "We're hit!" Before the system stabilized, they were cornered, but still dangerous. If they weren't crushed now, they would find a way to escape the trap. The station's defenses hammered their exposed ships, blasting them apart before they could regroup. One Vorak destroyer, realizing the trap too late, tried to disengage, only to be caught in the crossfire of the Griffin's main batteries. It didn't stand a chance. "They're breaking off," a pilot called out. "They're retreating," but Mauser barely registered it. His eyes flicked over the battlefield. Wreckage floated lifelessly where human ships had once been. A transport, its hull breached, drifted in slow rotation, emergency beacons flickering weakly. A fighter pilot's last transmission still echoed in his mind. "I can't shake them, Ika," cutting off in static as his ship was swallowed by fire. The Vorak were gone, but they had taken too many with them. There was no celebration on Tarsus Station. The aftermath was brutal. Smoke drifted through parts of the station's interior, where hull breaches had vented entire sections to space. Fire teams rushed to contain damage, medical crews dragging the wounded to triage zones set up in the lower decks. Mauser stood on the bridge, fists clenched. Casualty report. The channel crackled before Kanan's voice came through, quieter than usual. 4 ships lost. Multiple station personnel killed. We're still counting the wounded. A cold weight settled in Mauser's chest. They had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. The hangar of Tarsus Station reeked of battle. The air was thick with the acrid scent of scorched hull plating, the groan of stressed metal filling the space. Sparks flickered from exposed wiring, casting brief flashes of light over medics rushing between the wounded, their hurried steps sharp against the steel deck. Mouser stepped off the Griffin, his boots meeting the cold surface as the last remnants of adrenaline drained from his system. The silence wasn't relief, it was the hollow aftermath of a fight that had cost too much. Admiral Sean Dangar waited near the docking platform, uniform stained with smoke, exhaustion etched into his face. He met Mouser's gaze. Neither man spoke. They didn't need to. "This can't happen again," Dangar said, voice low but firm. Mouser nodded. No argument there. "We need answers," he added, his tone carrying the weight of the last battle. "If the Zinari know anything, it's time we hear it." Dangar's expression hardened. "Bridge. Now." They pushed forward, stepping past engineers struggling to repair the damage from the Vorak assault. Crew members snapped salutes, but no one spoke. There was no time for anything but action. The command deck was still tense when they arrived, officers murmuring over sensor readouts, tracking potential enemy movement. Freya Kasia was already at the comm station, steady despite the tension tightening around them. "Hailing the Zinari now," she said, fingers tapping across the console. "No response yet, but the channel is open. They should recognize our signal." The main view screen flickered for a moment. Then, a figure appeared. The Zinari leader was tall, humanoid in shape, but covered in iridescent, chitinous plating that shifted subtly in the station's artificial light. His features were sharp, insectoid, a crown of rigid spines framing a face with piercing, multifaceted eyes. His mandibles twitched slightly as he regarded them. "This is High Seeker Valzir of the Zinari." His voice was layered, a strange mix of organic resonance and synthesized modulation. His mandibles twitched, his gaze sharp. There was no time for formalities. Mouser stepped forward. "Captain Kimi Mouser, United Earth Defense. We need to know what's happening, Seeker. We intercepted your distress calls. Your people were running for their lives." Valzir's mandibles clicked softly, his posture tense. "We are barely holding together." His voice carried an edge of urgency. The Vorak came without warning. No demands, no negotiations, just destruction. Dangar's brow furrowed. The Vorak. Valzir nodded slowly, the dim lighting casting shadows across the ridges of his exoskeletal frame. "They are not acting as scavengers or raiders. This is extermination. That doesn't match their profile," Dangar muttered. "The Vorak have always been opportunists. But this?" Valzir's gaze darkened. "Our reconnaissance fleet was ambushed," he said. "They found us first. We attempted retreat, but wherever we jumped, they followed. Every time." Mouser's stomach twisted. That wasn't possible. Not without... "They tracked your FTL jumps," Kanan voiced what Mouser was already thinking. Valzir gave a slow, deliberate nod. "They never lost us. Each time we exited FTL, they were waiting. We tried to reach our people to warn them, but nothing got through." His voice dropped slightly, as if the weight of the words was physical. "The last transmission from our fleet was a distress call, the one you intercepted." Kasia inhaled sharply, her hands tightening into fists. Mouser's pulse hammered in his ears. "That's how they found us here. They tracked your ships. When we intercepted your distress call, they followed." A heavy silence settled over the bridge. Dangar's jaw clenched. "That means nowhere is safe." "Not while they have this capability," Valzir confirmed. Mouser's mind raced through the implications. Every ship that escaped would only be leading the Vorak to their next target. "How do we stop it?" Mouser asked. Before Valzir could answer, alarms flared on the Zinari's side. The background of the transmission erupted in flashing lights, Zinari officers moving frantically behind their leader. The war room shuddered. Then a deep, thunderous explosion rocked the frame, sending sparks cascading from the ceiling. Valzir's mandibles twitched, his voice a low, fatal whisper. "They found us." The screen flickered, as explosions rocked the Zenari war room. Mouser stepped forward, gripping the console. "Valzir, we can send—" The transmission cut, static. Then, nothing. Silence swallowed the bridge. Mouser could hear his own breathing, the hum of the command deck, but no Zenari, no Valzir. Kezia worked her console quickly, desperation slipping into her movements. "Connection's dead," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're gone." Mouser's hands curled into fists. They had to move, now. Silence hung heavy over Tarsus Station. The holoscreen where Valzir once stood was now static. The bridge crew stood frozen, the only sounds the distant hum of failing systems and the occasional flicker of sparking conduits. Mouser stiffened. They couldn't wait. "We're going after them," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "If we sit here, they'll be wiped out. And after that, the Vorak won't stop. Not with us. Not with anyone." He didn't wait. Tapping his communicator, he strode for the exit. "All combat-ready personnel, report to the hangar immediately. If you can pilot, if you can fight, suit up. We launch in minutes." The station exploded into action. Mouser's voice carried through every deck, every corridor. Pilots rushed from their quarters, engineers dropped their tools, and officers grabbed their gear, the reality of battle taking hold. They weren't waiting for orders. They were ready. As Mouser entered the hangar, dozens of soldiers and pilots were already strapping into their flight suits. The metallic whine of ships warming up filled the vast chamber, and deck crews hurried through final checks. He climbed onto a raised platform, his voice sharp, steady. "We all know what's happening out there. You've seen it, you've fought it, you've lost people to it." His gaze swept across them. Hard faces, determined eyes. The Zenari aren't just running anymore. They're being hunted. And if we don't stop this now, we're next. Silence. Then, a nod. Another. A ripple of agreement spreading through the hangar. "We move fast. We hit hard. And we don't stop until we make them pay for every last one of our people they took." A low murmur of approval turned into a roar. Mouser didn't waste another second. "To your ships! We launch now!" He jumped down from the platform, already striding toward the Griffin. On the bridge, Admiral Sean Dangar saw Mouser's movement and agreed with him. So he moved fast, too. "Snyder, get me a fleet scan. What do we have in range?" Lieutenant Mary Snyder, one of his comms officers, was already running the request. Her eyes flicked between multiple screens as she worked the console quickly. "Nothing within immediate reach, Admiral. Closest possible backup is from 2 outposts." Dangar keyed a priority channel. "This is Admiral Sean Dangar of Tarsus Station. We have engaged Vorak forces and confirmed they are tracking FTL jumps. The Zenari homeworld is under siege. We need immediate reinforcement. Any available forces, respond." A brief pause. Then, confirmation of transmission. He exhaled sharply. They would come, or they wouldn't. But Mouser couldn't wait. "Snyder, get me a line to Mouser." She nodded, patching the transmission through. Inside the Griffin, Mouser was already settling into his command seat, Kanan at his side. Around them, the fleet was preparing for the jump. Fighters taking position, escort ships forming up, and even lightly armored cargo haulers repurposed for combat operations, their holds emptied to maximize speed and maneuverability. "Captain, Dangar on the line," Kezia reported from comms. "Patch him through." "Mouser, 2 stations are sending reinforcements. No full fleets, but enough to back you up," Dangar said. "I'll take whatever we can get," Mouser replied. "You're alone until they arrive. Don't get yourself killed before they do." "No promises," Mouser muttered. He cut the channel and focused on the task ahead. "Coordinates locked?" "Confirmed, sir. Ready to jump." Mouser exhaled. "All ships, jump." The Griffin and its fleet ripped through space, stars stretching into long streaks of white before the darkness of FTL travel consumed them. Mouser leaned forward, eyes fixed on the swirling void outside. "Try the Zenari again," he ordered. Kezia fine-tuned the frequencies, searching for a signal. "Weak signal. Barely holding. The speakers crackled, filled with static and fragmented words. Multiple. Incoming. Overwhelmed. Forces. Cannot. Give me numbers, Mouser demanded. More static. Then, too many. No escape. Holding as long as... The transmission died. Kasia swore under her breath, hands still working the console. Signal's completely gone. They're either jammed or... She didn't need to finish. Mouser's jaw clenched. We'll do what we can with what we have, he muttered, then louder. Prep weapons. We're going in hot. The fleet ripped out of FTL, bursting into real space over the Zenari homeworld. Mouser had planned this jump for maximum impact, a tactical sledgehammer meant to drive straight into the enemy's gut. The Griffin emerged like a spear point, leading a synchronized formation of escorts, gunships, and repurposed cargo haulers. The moment they stabilized, the entire fleet opened fire. Fighters and gunships roared into the fray, their arrival fracturing the Vorak fleet before they could react. Railguns thundered, missile salvos streaked across the void, and plasma bursts carved through enemy ranks. The Griffin's cannons shredded the first Vorak fighter in its path, the explosion rippling outward. The ambush was devastating. Several enemy ships were vaporized in seconds, their hulls torn apart before their crews could react. For a second, the Vorak fleet faltered as the unexpected assault overwhelmed them. Their formations rippled with disruption, smaller ships stalling mid-maneuver as command vessels processed the new threat. A battleship caught in a crossfire banked hard to evade a railgun blast. Too slow. The impact tore through its flank, sending spirals of fire venting into space. Then, the Vorak snapped back. Commands rippled through their encrypted channels, their forces shifting as one. Squadrons realigned, their claw-shaped warships twisting with unnatural agility as they reversed momentum. What had been disarray became counteroffensive. Shit! Kanan snarled through the comms. They're already reorganizing. They're adapting fast. All ships, engage. Escorts, cut off their retreat. Hit them hard, Mouser shouted. The human fleet stormed forward, a wall of metal and fire hammering into the Vorak lines. Railguns howled, plasma fire carved through enemy hulls, and missiles streaked across the void like falling stars. The Griffin twisted between enemy squadrons, dodging incoming fire by razor-thin margins. Its cannons flared, sending hyper-accelerated projectiles smashing into a Vorak corvette. The enemy ship spasmed under the onslaught, armor plating peeling away in spirals of molten slag before its core ruptured, a blinding inferno consuming it from the inside out. "One down!" Kanan barked. But there was no time to celebrate. In mere seconds, the Vorak switched from defense to a brutal counteroffensive. They weren't panicking. They were evolving. Their strike wings surged forward, slicing through human ranks like a well-honed blade. Coordinated volleys rained down, ripping through human destroyers with ruthless accuracy. "We're taking heavy losses." Kasia's voice wavered under the weight of the reports flooding her console. 3 ships down, another barely holding together. Mouser gritted his teeth as he watched a human destroyer buckle under a coordinated barrage, its shields collapsing in a blinding burst of energy. Its core detonated seconds later, sending a wave of superheated debris spiraling through the void, colliding with nearby fighters and shredding them apart before they could even react. This was supposed to be an ambush. Instead, they had walked straight into a grinder. "Vorak bombers inbound, heading straight for the command sectors," Kanan shouted. "They're targeting key fortifications. If we don't stop them, the planet's defenses are done." Mouser's eyes flicked to the planet below, and his stomach turned. The Zainari homeworld was burning. Entire fortifications had been reduced to blackened craters, the once proud towers and defensive turrets turned to slag and ruin. Vorak warships hovered over the cities like vultures, unleashing precision bombardments on any resistance that still held. Zainari strongholds were collapsing, their warriors fighting to the last, their defenses being erased from existence. A final stand. And they were losing. Mouser's gut twisted into a knot. This wasn't just a battle. This was an extermination. The Zainari weren't just losing. They were being wiped from existence. "We have to hold them off," Fighters, intercept those bombers. Escorts, push them back. The Griffin shuddered under a concentrated assault. A Vorak frigate had locked onto them, hammering their shields with relentless fire. Red warning sirens shrieked through the bridge, screens flashing critical damage reports. "We're boxed in," Kanan yelled. "They're pressing from every angle." Mauser's fists slammed against the console. "Damn it, we're losing this fight." Their fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, outmaneuvered. The Vorak weren't just holding the battlefield, they were crushing it. The battlefield pulsed with the dying screams of ships, human, Zinari, Vorak alike. Fighters exploded in flashes of burning debris. Entire capital ships were split apart by merciless bombardments. The Griffin's shields flickered under the strain, energy surging as its systems struggled to compensate. They couldn't hold out much longer. Then, through the chaos, a voice crackled over the comms, sharp, confident. "Looks like you could use some help, Mauser." For a second, Mauser froze. That voice. A new fleet erupted from FTL behind them, energy signatures flooding the tactical display. Massive battle cruisers, escort destroyers, and fighter squadrons surged forward like a second wave of fury. "Yuji!" The void split open behind them. A second human fleet snapped out of FTL, their engines blazing as they charged into the fight. "This is Captain Yuji Garrison of the UNS Quiron. We're moving in to support. Contact in 30 seconds. Try not to get yourselves killed before we get there." But they weren't alone. Another voice cracked through the comms. "Captain Kwajalein Sena, UNS Anubis. Garrison says you're the best we've got, Mauser. Let's see if he was right." Mauser let out a sharp breath. "Then let's get to work." The Quiron fired before its FTL wake had even settled, its forward railguns punching through 2 Vorak destroyers in a single, brutal shot. The vessels collapsed inward, torn apart by the sheer force. The Anubis, a warship bristling with heavy cannons, unleashed a hurricane of firepower, turning a Vorak battleship into a floating wreck within seconds. The Vorak froze. For the first time, they were off balance. Mauser didn't hesitate. "Fighters, press forward! Break their ranks!" The Vorak reeled. Their formations rippled like a storm-tossed sea, warships faltering mid-flight as emergency beacons flared across enemy comms. A command cruiser stalled, its pilots scrambling to recalculate trajectories. Too late. A railgun round from the Quiron punched through its bridge, severing its command link in a burst of light and molten wreckage. Vorak transmissions overlapped in a chaotic, panicked mess. Then, through the chaos, their leader's voice cut like a blade. "Reform the line, now! Crush them!" And they obeyed. For the first time in the battle, they hesitated. A split-second reaction to the sheer force of the reinforcements ripping into their lines. Their warships wavered, formations spiraling into temporary chaos as human railgun volleys tore through their ranks with deadly accuracy. For that brief moment, Mauser saw it. The freeze, the instinctive pause. They hadn't expected this. "Their lines are collapsing," Kanan's voice came fast. Mauser's grin sharpened. "Good. Keep them that way." Their hesitation vanished. Their disarray hardened into brutal efficiency. Instead of scattering, they surged forward, diving into the wreckage of their own fallen ships, using the burning debris as cover. Their attack craft wove between shattered hulls, darting around explosions to strike from unpredictable angles. "New contact patterns," Kezia called. "They're using the debris to mask their approach." Mauser barely had time to process before the first ambush landed. A Vorak squadron burst from behind the wreckage of a downed cruiser, plasma cannons flashing at point-blank range. The lead escort took a direct hit. Its shields crackled and collapsed as explosions tore through its hull. The ship buckled, twisted, then ruptured, its wreckage spiraling into the dark. "Escort down!" Kanan shouted. "They're closing in fast!" Mauser snarled. "Not today!" The Griffin rolled hard, banking to avoid a plasma burst as its cannons tracked the attackers. It unleashed hell, railgun rounds ripping through Vorak hulls, turning their ambush into a firestorm. But the real threat was still ahead. Another wave descended on the Quiron, targeting the battlecruiser's weak spots with brutal coordination. The ship's flak turrets lit up the void, shredding some of the interceptors, but more kept coming. "Quiron is taking heavy pressure." Kezia voice was tight. "They won't hold under this kind of sustained fire." Mouser's mind raced. The Vorak weren't retreating. They were trying to cripple the reinforcements before the battle could fully turn. "Quiron, pull back 2 clicks. Escorts, form a screen. Buy them breathing room." The response was instant. The human fleet repositioned, cutting off pursuit routes, forcing the Vorak into direct engagement. It was working, but it wasn't enough. "New strike wave incoming," Kanan warned. "They're shifting targets." Mouser's stomach tightened. The Vorak's attack patterns shifted. Fighters abandoned their gunship targets, converging, all of them, on a single ship. The Anubis. "Shit," Kanan breathed. "They're overwhelming it." The first barrage slammed into the warship's side. Plasma ripped across the hull, breaking through secondary armor. Explosions detonated across multiple decks, and atmosphere vented into space. "Anubis is hit hard," Kezia called out. "They won't hold under another direct assault." On the comms, Captain Cena's voice cut through the static. "Hull integrity's failing. We need cover now." Mouser's jaw tightened. They had seconds to act. "All escort wings, cover the Anubis. Quiron, reposition and provide suppressive fire. Fighters, break their formation." The battlefield erupted anew. The Griffin surged forward, its guns spitting fire, carving through the Vorak ranks. Missiles detonated mid-flight, flak bursts tore through interceptors, and fighter squadrons stormed into the chaos, cutting down the attackers before they could land another kill shot. Trailing fire and debris, the Anubis twisted in a desperate arc, its weapons burning white-hot as it retaliated. The Vorak kept coming. One squadron, diving low beneath the wreckage of a destroyed cruiser, angled toward the Anubis's exposed flank. "Not this time," Mouser growled. The Griffin's broadside turrets lit up the darkness, catching the interceptors mid-dive. The Vorak ships vanished in a flash of destruction. A moment of silence on the comms, then Cena's voice. "That was too damn close." Mouser exhaled, jaw tight. "Still breathing?" A chuckle. "For now." But the battle wasn't over. The Vorak were faltering. Their movements grew erratic. Their ranks began to collapse. They fought tooth and claw to hold the line, but their advantage was gone. Mouser saw it in real time, the shift, and he wasn't about to let them recover. "All ships," he said, voice steady, commanding. "Advance!" The Griffin lunged ahead, spearheading the final push. Behind it, the human fleet advanced in unison, pressing the assault. Vorak ships shattered under relentless fire, the void turning into a burning graveyard. And in the distance, one last ship fled. Mouser's eyes locked onto it. "Griffin, to all ships, focus fire on that vessel. Do not let them escape." The human fleet answered in unison. Railguns thundered, plasma fire streaked through the void, missile salvos closing the distance in a final, relentless barrage. The Vorak ship weaved through the wreckage, evading some fire, but there was nowhere left to run. Its shields buckled, armor shattered. A direct hit from the Quiron's forward cannons split its primary hull, and a final detonation ripped through its reactor core. The last Vorak battleship disintegrated in a final blinding explosion. The comms fell silent, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had raged moments before. Then, "Captain, communications are fully restored," Kezia called. "The jamming field is gone." Mouser exhaled sharply, realization settling in. "So that was it," Kanan muttered. "They were blocking all signals until now." "A tactic," Mouser said darkly. "They wanted this system cut off before they burned it down." "And they almost succeeded," Garrison added. But they hadn't. A transmission crackled through the now clear channel. The face of High Seeker Valzir appeared on the holoscreen, his insectoid features worn but resolute. Humans, Valzir said, his voice edged with something close to relief. Today, you have done more than fight. You have ensured our survival. Mouser took a breath. We weren't going to stand by and let them erase you, Seeker. That's not what we do. Valzir's multifaceted eyes studied them all, Mouser, Garrison, and Sina, before his mandibles twitched in acknowledgement. Then let this day be remembered. The Zenari will not forget. A pause. Then, you are welcome to land and stand among us, Captain Mouser. You and your friends, it would be an honor. Mouser exchanged a glance with Kanan, then looked back at Valzir. I appreciate the offer, Seeker, but we have unfinished business. His tone was firm. There are more of them out there. And we're going to make sure they never try this again. Valzir regarded him for a long moment before giving a slow nod. Then go. And when we meet again, it will be as allies. Mouser nodded in return. Good hunting, Seeker. The transmission cut. Mouser turned back to his crew. All ships, prepare for jump. We're not staying. Across the fleet, engines roared back to life. The Griffin, the Quiron, and the Anubis led the way, formations tight, disciplined, ready to move. The last remnants of the fight drifted in silence. Vorak wreckage, shattered hulls, echoes of a war that had nearly been lost. Mouser took one last look at the war-torn planet below. Then, execute FTL jump. The stars stretched into infinity. The fleet vanished, and just like that, they were gone. Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and one last thing. Every great soldier knows that to survive and become a hero, taking care of yourself is key. So before you go, check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's important. And I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.